This video deeply reflects on the universal experience of human suffering, particularly the indescribable and immeasurable pain of losing a child. The death of a loved one, especially a child, is a distressing and devastating experience that tests people's emotional and spiritual resilience. However, let's look at how pain is experienced and manifested. In many cultures, death is seen as the definitive end of life, and mourning is seen as necessary but deeply painful, often leading people to fixate on the physical body of the deceased rather than focusing on the spirit or in the soul that transcends death. Grief, although valid, often turns into a form of selfish and materialistic attachment, focused on what is tangible, on the body that rots, while the soul of the deceased continues its journey beyond death. Human pain must not just be an egocentric reaction or a form of attachment to the physical body, but must be recognized as part of a larger and more significant process of spiritual evolution. Loss, when viewed from a higher spiritual perspective, can be an opportunity for transformation, learning and growth, rather than an unchanging tragedy. In many cases, reactions to loss are characterized by an excessive attachment to the physical image of the deceased, as if the body were the essence of the person. Lament and suffering become a cult of the corpse, an unreal attachment to the flesh which, despite having been a vehicle for the soul, is not the true identity of the human being. Parents often, upon losing their children, become so attached to the physical memory of the deceased that they become incapable of understanding that the death of the body is not the end of existence, but a point of transition to a higher spiritual state. This type of prolonged attachment to the body and the pain associated with it is seen as a manifestation of selfishness, because, by focusing only on physical death, individuals refuse to look beyond the earthly experience and understand death as a natural process. And spiritual. The criticism also extends to society in general, which often promotes mourning rituals and physical memorializations as a way of dealing with loss. This often perpetuates pain without leading to true healing or spiritual understanding. Instead of fixating on personal suffering, individuals could transform the pain of loss into actions of solidarity and compassion, helping others in similar suffering situations. This act of transcending personal pain to alleviate the suffering of others is seen as a truer way of honoring those who have departed. When parents face the death of a child, they tend to view their grief as unique, and often do not recognize that everyone, at some point, will face some type of pain or loss. Instead of cultivating empathy and understanding of another's pain, many people end up isolating themselves in their own suffering and denying the spiritual experience that pain can offer. This lack of spiritual sensitivity prevents people from seeing suffering as an opportunity to grow, learn, and connect with others. This type of spiritual selfishness is a failure, because pain, far from being something exclusive, is part of the universal human experience. By focusing exclusively on their own suffering, people miss the chance to expand their capacity to love and help others. True love is one that is not limited to those with whom we have emotional or blood ties, but is extended to all people who are suffering. This requires a spiritual transformation in which personal pain becomes an impulse to act for the benefit of others, recognizing that true happiness and peace come from helping others. Contrary to the materialist view, death is not the end of existence, but a transition. The death of the physical body is not an absolute end, but part of a natural cycle in which the human soul continues its journey on the spiritual plane. The physical body is described as a temporary vehicle that the soul uses to express itself on earth, but which, after death, no longer has value in itself. Death, therefore, should not be seen with the same weight as a definitive end, as the soul of the deceased is immortal. The reaction to grief, if spiritually oriented, should not be an attachment to the flesh, but a process of understanding the spiritual meaning of death. By realizing that the soul does not die with the body, parents could, instead of selfishly grieving, celebrate the life and spiritual journey of their children, knowing that they continue to exist in another form. Furthermore, life is not something that begins and ends with the birth and death of the body. Human existence is part of a broader spiritual cycle, where each human being has several lives to fulfill their spiritual lessons. Therefore, the pain of loss should not be seen as a punishment, but as an opportunity for the souls of both parents and the deceased child to grow and evolve. Excessive sentimental attachment to the dead body of a loved one is like false sentimentality. This excessive veneration for the flesh, instead of allowing healthy mourning, ends up strengthening a materialistic attachment that does not favor spiritual growth. Attachment to the body is a form of denial of the true reality of the soul, which transcends matter. True love, which addresses the soul and its immortality, is replaced by a distorted and selfish love, which focuses only on the physical. This false sentimentality prevents a person from moving beyond grief and opening up to new forms of love, which are more spiritual and universal. True overcoming of grief, therefore, lies not in trying to revive the physical image of the deceased or in remaining in the suffering, but in accepting the transience of the body and acting in accordance with the principles of spiritual love, which involve helping others to overcome your own pain. The concept of karma, or the law of cause and effect, is approached to clarify the spiritual relationship between parents and children. Life experiences, including the suffering of loss, do not happen randomly, but follow a spiritual logic based on karma. Family relationships, especially between parents and children, are often influenced by past life situations, where children may have caused suffering to their parents, which leads to a process of repaying spiritual debts in a new incarnation. In this context, the pain of loss can be seen not as a fatality or punishment, but as an opportunity to pay and learn from the spiritual debts accumulated over several lives. Karma, therefore, proposes that suffering and loss are not accidental or purposeless events, but parts of a larger cycle of learning and spiritual evolution. This karmic perspective helps parents see suffering more broadly and understand that pain, no matter how intense, has a spiritual meaning that goes beyond the simple loss of a loved one. The relationship with children, seen from this perspective, can be understood as an opportunity for both parents and children to evolve spiritually, pay off debts and play a role in mutual learning. Love transcends the boundaries of human selfishness, and this is what should be the focus of all individuals, especially in the context of suffering and loss. True love is the love that goes beyond the flesh, towards the soul of the other, recognizing the immortality of the spirit. By recognizing that the soul never dies and that life is not limited to the physical body, parents can transcend physical grief and open themselves to a deeper, more universal love. Transcendental love involves a deep connection with all human beings, beyond personal and family relationships. This love is not limited to one being, but expands to everyone, recognizing that we are all parts of a great spiritual whole. This love is what can heal, console and transform the pain of loss into something that enriches the spiritual lives of everyone involved. The human perception of time can influence how we deal with grief and loss. Over time, the image of a loved one who has passed away tends to become a fixed symbol in the minds of the bereaved, freezing the memory of the deceased at a certain moment in life. This can result in a distorted view of reality, as the person who has passed away is no longer the same, and the memory of their presence, in the physical body, is something in constant transformation, both on the physical and spiritual planes. The view of time as something immutable, which puts us in contact with death as a definitive tragedy, is criticized. The spirit is immortal and the true spiritual vision of time must be seen as something more fluid and continuous. The suffering that is fixated on lamenting the image of the lost body is an illusion, because the spirit, by transcending the flesh, continues its evolution in another form of existence. The criticism here is about how attachment to images of the past and emotions linked to suffering paralyze spiritual progress. By fixating on an event such as the death of a child, without the proper understanding of spiritual continuity, individuals distance themselves from the true transformation that could come from accepting and overcoming grief. Time, in this sense, is not an enemy that must be fought, but a growth tool that, if understood spiritually, helps the soul to heal, learn, and evolve. We see here the difficulty that many have in loving others, especially those outside the immediate family circle. He suggests that the pain of grief often prevents us from developing true empathy for the suffering of others. Genuine love, according to the author, is one that expands beyond immediate blood and emotional ties and turns to the collective, for the good of all. The big question here is how to overcome the selfishness that limits our emotional relationships and prevents us from seeing others as beings equally worthy of compassion and love. When it comes to a lost child, the pain is usually absorbed in a closed world, where the focus is exclusively on personal loss, without recognizing the suffering of other people. Selfish mourning over the loss of a loved one causes many parents to isolate themselves in their pain, unable to look beyond their own pain to realize that there are other mothers and fathers who are equally grieving the loss of their children. This emotional isolation is often also fostered by the materialistic view that only those with whom we share a blood connection are worthy of our attention and care. To break this barrier of selfishness, a process of spiritual transformation is necessary, in which the person begins to see the suffering of others with the same care and love with which they take care of their own pain. Suffering, although a painful experience, can become the key to true spiritual healing when understood as a path to growth and transformation. Suffering, when lived with spiritual awareness, can become a powerful instrument for the development of the soul, as it teaches us to deal with the contradictions of human life, to overcome selfishness and to find a greater purpose in love and care for others. Pain should not be seen as a punishment, but as an invitation to spiritual awakening. When parents focus on the pain of loss without recognizing the immortality of the spirit, they are limiting themselves to a narrow view of life. True healing comes when, instead of mourning the loss of a physical body, a person begins to focus on the spirit that survives death and that, in a way, transcends the limitations of the flesh. True peace comes from accepting that death is not the end, but a transition to a new stage of evolution. This view of suffering as an opportunity for transformation is not easy, but it is essential so that the soul can free itself from the cycle of pain and lament and find a deeper purpose in its existence. By overcoming personal pain and attachment to the physical body, the individual can begin to live more fully, helping others and living in harmony with universal spiritual laws. It is important not just to experience suffering passively, but to act actively to transform this suffering into something positive. The true way to honor the memory of a child or loved one is through concrete actions that help other people, such as welcoming orphans, helping those who suffer or donating to causes that alleviate the pain of others. This not only transforms personal pain, but also contributes to the spiritual evolution of everyone involved. True love is not limited to the suffering of a loved one, but extends to all human beings, recognizing universal suffering as part of the human experience. When we act to alleviate the pain of others, we transform our own pain into something greater and more meaningful. Instead of getting stuck in selfish suffering, we can use pain as an opportunity to grow spiritually and help others do the same. We can look at death in a spiritual way, recognizing that life is not limited to what we see in our material reality. Death is a natural and inevitable event, but it is not the end of existence. True death is the death of selfishness, of the false view that we are just bodies, that suffering is irreparable and that life is limited to earthly experience. Death, therefore, is a portal to a new reality, where the soul continues its journey towards enlightenment and evolution. The true meaning of life lies in overcoming selfishness, understanding the immortality of the soul and the ability to love beyond material and emotional limitations. The pain of loss, if seen from this perspective, becomes an opportunity to transcend the limits of human suffering and connect with the spiritual greatness that surrounds us all. We have to rethink our vision of death, suffering and love, proposing a broader and more spiritual vision that transcends pain and invites us to grow towards a true understanding of what it means to be human, in all its spiritual and material aspects. If you like this video and want to continue learning about the true meaning of life, death, and spiritual love, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Your subscription helps us create more inspiring content for you and others seeking deeper insights into spirituality. Together we can spread the light of knowledge.